What's up, guys? Eric here from MajorLeagueTrading.com, and I haven't done a YouTube video in a while, but I wanted to kick it off with a lesson from a losing trade today in Netflix. And there's a couple areas where I went wrong. There's a couple things I definitely could have done better and followed my rules and the things that I wrote out this morning. So I want to kind of talk through those. I did end up losing $446 on the trade. I did trade it small, so there is something that I did right, even though I did some things wrong in addition to that. So hopefully that makes sense, and it should as we talk more about this particular trade setup here. So what we've got right now is a chart of the S&P 500 here. These are the S&P futures, and these were the levels I had coming into today: 44.8350s down to 44.60 and a quarter, and what I wrote this morning, so I ended up, yesterday was a travel day for me, but what I ended up writing here was that if you would have told me yesterday that we would see an 80-point range in the S&Ps to the upside, and then Netflix down almost 100 points on earnings with a market that is managing to hold green, and even more so was getting a gap up this morning, I would have thought that you started smoking a day early. Today is 4:20. And if you would have told me that yesterday, that is what I would have thought. That scenario is not necessarily something that I saw playing out here overall in the markets, but nonetheless, it is what we had. And so a couple things coming into today, I went ahead and wrote out, kind of my ideas here, and one of those being right here, or a couple of those being in the S&Ps right here. As for levels, we've got support at 44.60 quarters, one above at 44.8350s. An early morning push into that level that can get a small reaction and push through with confirmation closes above, then I would be looking at continued longs on the day. So that was my first long scenario on the day, something that I wanted to see take place. If we can push into 83.50 and fail and trade back under the open, that would open the door for a retest of 44.60 quarters. We push into that level, we fail the open, and it takes us right down into 44.60 quarters. So we traded, 3 ticks above here on the top side, and we traded down into 58.50s here on the first test there of 44.60 quarters. So this scenario automatically from the open here took place within 15-20 minutes of the day. A pullback first thing to 44.60 quarters. That doesn't trade 83.50s first would be a potential long on a trend flip. That's not what we got. We got the test of 83.50s first. And then under 44.60, especially after a failed test of 83.50, would likely work us back down into the 44.30s. And you can see we did try this once, twice, and essentially 3 times a day. We did get a nice push, 15 points or so through that 44.60 quarter level. But notice what the hourly chart ends up doing. It ends up putting in a bottoming tail for us here, and we cannot get any continuation to the downside. Now, again, I was looking for 44.30s. We got 43.50s on the day. It looks like there as the low. So a couple things here. If you missed the first S&P trade here, which was the test of the level and the failure of the open at 77.50s, that worked out right down into the level. Now from there, nothing else ends up taking place here in the overall markets, and we close, just 10 points away from the opening print. Small red bar on the daily chart with a little bit of a bottoming tail. So seeing this scenario play out, by the time I took my Netflix position, should have told me, hey, maybe this is going to end up being a little bit of a range day, or hey, maybe we end up actually breaking under 60 quarters and go lower. So why is it that you're looking for a long in Netflix? Well, and I did take a long in Netflix, and I'll show you guys how that ended up working out here on the charts in just a second. But what my plan was today in Netflix, this was the big watch this morning for earnings. I said it's looking super, super ugly here. And what I was watching for was a move down into the 233 area or so. I had a 233 to kind of 230 zone marked up here on the charts. If we can flush hard from the open and it gets ugly down into that level, then shorts are basically impossible from the open with such a jack and IV. I didn't think the puts were going to pay. That ends up not being the case today. We ended up getting a nice, 12-point move down into 233s from the opening print here of 245.20s, and those puts actually did end up paying. We didn't get the hard flush that I was expecting. It was really slow and controlled selling the whole way down there. So from that, that's what I want to see first, is the move down into that level. If and when that level is tested, and an intraday trend flip would be a good attempt for longs that can take back out the opening print. So that's my first scenario, is I want to see it push down into the level. From there, I want to see an intraday trend flip with room to kind of work back into this gap, was my thinking. Risk reward will be crazy high on that type of trade. Again, we would have some room to the upside to go. The gap was maybe a little bit extended to the downside, and again, thinking that we would get that kind of push back to the upside was my thought process, my analysis, all that stuff in the morning. In hindsight, you could look at this and be like, well, why didn't you just short the break of the open and take profits into the targets? Again, I thought the IV was going to be a little bit too high for that type of trade. We were gapping a little bit under, this 254 level that I was kind of watching here, and we've been basing sideways at it all morning. I thought we were going to kind of snap through that and then back up above it here today. So in hindsight, yes, would have been nice to take the short and ride it down, which in fact Rob actually did. Rob and the MLT stock guys in the Discord did in fact take that trade to the downside. Worked out nicely for them. But here was my trade in it, and this is the thing I did right and the thing I did wrong. Number one is I ended up taking a long right here, and what I ended up doing here was picking up the 235 calls here. I bought those for $7.88 at 9:51 on that bar that I just showed you right here on the chart. This nice green bar, it pushed down into those two levels I was watching, 233s down into 231s, pushed down nicely into those levels, and I went ahead and stepped in and I bought two of these. Now, this is something that I did right, because what my plan said was that I needed to wait for an intraday trend flip in order to take a position. Now, if we do get an intraday trend flip from that level, I'm permitted to scale up into this, with potentially 10 or more contracts. Now, what I did right is that even though I was trying to be early and not wait for that trend flip, I didn't go aggressive in this and pick up 10 contracts, because had I done, my loss would have been 5 times greater than it was today. So I ended up getting in those at $7.88. I ended up stopping out of those at $5.65 about 7 minutes later, which ends up being, if I can get the charts to work, which ends up being right down in here as we started crossing under 225s on this. So could I or should have, just went ahead and stopped out after this first red bar that reversed my green bar as kind of my entry bar that I ended up taking there? Well, yeah, in hindsight, that would have worked out really well. Also, in hindsight, probably should have waited for that trend flip and not taken the 2 contracts that I did. The thing here is that I would take this trade. Again, it was part of my plan. I did take smaller size to get in potentially a little bit early, watch the trade, see if it worked out. My trail on this, I will say, was a little bit too big. It should have held this area here on this bar. So giving it these, extra basically 5 points worth of room, I probably could have gone ahead and got out of that, somewhere up here, 228s, 227s, and saved a little bit of money on that. So overall, I don't think it was a bad trade. I didn't wait for my actual entry, so that's a strike against me. I did take smaller size since I thought I was going to be early and I didn't have that trend flip just yet. I anticipated it, but again, I did let it go a little bit further than I normally or should have done, and part of that was because I had smaller size too, so the loss wasn't really getting to me at that point, and I didn't necessarily trade the chart in the way in which I should have. So anyways, hopefully that helps you guys in kind of understanding the thought process and showing that losing trade. and a couple of the mistakes and a couple of things that I did right here on this trade. So if you guys enjoyed this content, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, let me know any future videos you guys want me to make. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care and I hope it helps.